110 people, by the way, have been killed since dawn today, 591 since Tuesday, just over 1,000 injured. And of course, that's all we know about. And I think to speak to your point of how aggressive this is, I want to try to play something from a clip here of Israel Katz, who I think is the defense minister. Now, you know how these Israeli ministers be constantly switching around. But nonetheless, a message he sent to Gazans after the fighting had already resumed.
תושבי עזה, זאת פניית הזרה האחרונה. הסינואר הראשון הרס את עזה, והסינואר השני יחריב אותה לחלוטין. תקיפת חיל האוויר נגד מחבלי החמאס הייתה רק הצעד הראשון. ההמשך יהיה קשה בהרבה, ואתם תשלמו את מלוא המחיר. בקרוב יתחיל שוב פינוי האוכלוסייה מאזורי הקרבות. אם לא ישוחררו כל החטופים הישראלים, והחמאס לא יסולק מעזה, ישראל תפעל בעוצמות שעוד לא הכרתם. קבלו את עצת נשיא ארצות הברית. תחזירו את החטופים ותסלקו את החמאס, ויפתחו לכם אופציות אחרות, כולל יציאה למקומות אחרים בעולם למי שירצה. האלטרנטיבה היא הרס וחורבן מוחלט.
The alternative is total devastation. You will pay the full price. It'll be worse than you've ever expected before. I mean, I guess to be honest with you, Rania, it feels like from an Israeli perspective, they're just going for it. These right-wing Israeli parties, they believe in this greater Israel, you know what I'm saying, that all of historic Palestine should belong to them, most of what's Syria, Lebanon, you know, some of these things even go all the way into Iraq and different areas, the Sinai or whatever. And it feels like they just feel that they're just going to do it. This genocide and ethnic cleansing, that they're going to kill as many people as possible, starve as many people as possible, make it as difficult as they possibly can for people to live, and for the ones who stay alive, that they want to leave so that they can just fully take over. Like, they are fully going for it, all out genocide and ethnic cleansing. They're going to take this land. The economy minister, I think, said earlier this week, we need to take over all the West Bank too. So it feels like they're going for it. No matter how many people die, you know, they're going for it.
But you know what, Eugene? This is, let's call it Genocide 2.0.
Yeah.
They've been doing this for a year and a half now. And what they've learned in that year and a half is that there is no threshold that will make anybody step in to stop this. They've learned that they can bomb every hospital. They can starve premature babies. They can shoot children in the head for sport. They can fire, what was it in Hind Rajab? How many bullets was it? Like hundreds of bullets into a 6-7-year-old child. They can kill aid workers. They can kill doctors. They can rape people on camera. They have learned they can kill tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of Palestinians because to eliminate them. This is eliminationist. This is exterminationist. They can go on television and repeatedly say it from the top over and over again that they want to exterminate Palestinians, and there are no consequences. We've learned over the last year that in this moment in time, in the year 2025, there are no consequences for Israel carrying out an extermination plan live streamed before the world to see against the Palestinians of Gaza, and now it's being extended to the Palestinians of the West Bank. So as long as that is the situation, they will continue doing this. There's no reason to stop when there's no consequences and when your entire society is premised on the subjugation and extermination of the indigenous population. Yeah. From cradle to grave for generations now. Israelis are raised to believe they have to eliminate Palestinians in order for their own survival. Mm-hmm. That is what they are raised to believe. That is what their entire society is high on genocide.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen.
And that's what they're doing. I just want to point something out. This right now, they're saying Hamas, but the media is disgusting.
Yeah.
Like I saw a headline today from the BBC saying the Hamas-run ministry says this many people have died.
Right.
I mean, a year and a half into this, and you have the audacity to sit here and try to gaslight us into believing that this is a war on Hamas. This is a war on Palestinians. It's a genocide on Palestinians. Israelis say it. It's disgusting how the entire Western and honestly Gulf state media apparatus is still participating in this genocide. You are a participant in this genocide if you are a news editor writing the Hamas-run ministry.
Yeah, well, you know,
It's
this
disgusting.
actually came up at Politico this week because they ran an article that didn't say the Hamas-run ministry. And Politico, for people who don't know, is owned by Axel Springer, which is a big media conglomerate in Germany, but it's notably right-wing. Actually, when you sign up to work there, you have to sign something saying you'll support Israel, believe it or not. But this guy from the board is like, who authorized this at Politico? And basically just lambasted them for telling the truth. So I'm sure whoever did authorize it is in trouble, if not fired. But it was kind of amazing because it wasn't like it was a totally fact-based article. Not much you could say. But I just want to also note about this. I mean, there is a perverse logic to this because Israel from the very beginning has been a settler colonial project. That's in fact how they gained favor with the West in order to support them, with the British in particular, is they absolutely told them, like, we are a colonial project. We are going to colonize this. You look at like the New York Times from when they decided to go there, and it even says like Zionists vote to colonize Palestine. But, you know, so the history is there. It's all there. You know, many people have written about it. I don't need to say it. But I say all that to say the only like successful settler colonies are United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, basically. And then, you know, a few other islands connected to them. And what is the thing that we can note about those is the only way they survived is total extermination of the population. You look at South Africa, you look at Kenya, you look at some of this, Zimbabwe, formerly Rhodesia, you know, they were not able to kill everyone. And so ultimately, you know, they weren't able to succeed fully in their overall project. So I think from the point of view of the Israelis, and this is the point I was making about Greater Israel, they've always been very clear that the Israeli project can't really succeed unless it totally ethnically cleanses the territories it considers to be its own and kills or expels anyone that stands in their way. And they've carried that out kind of, you know, in fits and starts over the years, but very consistently over time. And now I think they're putting their foot on the accelerator. And I think to your point, they recognize that this is an opportunity. Like right now, no one really does seem like they want to stop them. So they better act now. And this is what Netanyahu has been known for. I mentioned this on this show many times, how he actually said just after Tiananmen Square that they had made a huge mistake not to have a massive transfer of population of Palestinians outside of the occupied territories while everyone was paying attention to China, because it would have been a great opportunity for them to do things they might not have been able to do otherwise. And so obviously, you know, the most opportunistic politician, you know, almost anywhere on the planet, he and his friends are recognizing we may never get another chance like this. And that's why all these far right-wing parties that are backing them are like, we can't end the war. We have to keep moving forward. We have to finish this until it's over, because they know if they were to actually go through with the ceasefire, they might not get this chance again. They might not be able to do what they're doing right now, and so they're going to kill anyone that they can in the context of it. I also just want to note, just from the point of view of the media per se, not the media per se, the breaking news per se, in addition to ground troops have gone in the Netzarim corridor, they also have started a new ground operation in Rafah. So an expansion, not just of bombing, but of the ground campaign in many different ways. But, you know, what I will say, Rania, is many times people escalate when they have the upper hand and it ends up backfiring on them. South Africa is a good example of that. Napoleon is a great example of that. Hitler is also a good example of that, to be honest with you. That I think that the implications of driving massive shifts in, you know, the global status quo are often not what you expect, which is why in the Israeli media, you're now starting to see more criticism emerge of Netanyahu, of people who are worried that perhaps he is pushing it a little too far and that they can't predict what the consequences are going to be. And they may be consequences that they cannot control in terms of shifts and changes in the region, including some of these, you know, kind of extraordinarily weak governments who are taking no action, perhaps not being there because of their own population's feelings. So I think it's a terrible situation, but I also think that there's an element of historical precedent here that's important to keep in context, that, oftentimes those who seem all powerful, that is, pride cometh before the fall, as it says in the Bible.
No, I think that's a really important point to grasp onto, because I think for a lot of people, this is just, you're going to do this again? You're going to make us all watch this again? It's like it starts to invoke a kind of helplessness among people that needs to be rejected. And also you can see the fact that you have all these repressive measures being carried out to shut down the movement for liberation in Palestine in this country, by really trying to terrify people, particularly students, particularly those who are on visas. But in general, they're trying to chill protest against genocide. They're doing everything in their power, using the violence of the state of the U.S. against people here to silence dissent against this genocide.
Yes.
So, it's at the same time, like, the people of Gaza are enduring a Holocaust. There's no other way to look at it. They're enduring the worst thing imaginable, and we're all being forced to basically watch it on our screens. And so we can't, the fear they're feeling is, significantly more intense than any fear that we feel here. That's for sure.
No, for sure. I think that it's the worst case scenario. And I think the point you're making too also about the chilling of speech, which I think is really important here, and one that we've seen with the gentleman, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting his name now, from India, who was recently deported because of his wife, or because of his, or not his wife, excuse me, because of his wife's father, at least allegedly. It's something I've been pointing out to a lot of people. There are millions of mixed status families in this country. So, regardless, this will have a chilling effect on all free speech, because I think it's important for people to understand what they're doing here. Like, they're using the guise of these deportation laws that the Secretary of State can get rid of anyone. But it's important to sort of read the fine print, so to speak. What they're saying is that speech is equal to action, which is something that is totally outside of the tradition of the First Amendment, which is that you can say whatever you want. And the government can only stop your speech when the speech is part of a broader subset of criminal activity. So if you say, you love Hamas, theoretically under the First Amendment, that in and of itself should be legal. But if you say, I love Hamas, and then it's part of a broader thing of you working with Hamas to take out some sort of act that would be illegal in America, then you can be arrested and you can be jailed. Your speech is not being criminalized, your actions are being criminalized, and your speech is one of many different forms of evidence of, your connections to some form of criminal activity. So once they've been able to establish this from the point of view of people who are, on green cards, permanent residents, on visas, or undocumented, whatever it may be, it's not a big jump for them to start bringing cases against U.S. citizens and to say the exact same thing, that this person said X, Y, and Z, and that is a form of support of terrorism or some other form of whatever. Journalism, same thing. Well, they communicated with this group to arrange an interview, and I view the interview as being too friendly. So in fact, that was a conspiracy for them to be a part of a criminal action, with these organizations. So you can see how slippery the slope is for citizens. But I, again, want to just go back to where I started here, is that there are millions of people in this country where, someone's a permanent resident, someone's a citizen in terms of a child, a spouse, or a parent, which means that if you see a situation like what happened with this gentleman from India, you can think, okay, I'm a citizen, but my spouse is not a citizen. So should I go to a protest or speak out against any issue? Right? Like, let's just take it outside of this. Let's just go to tariffs against Mexico. There's a lot of Mexican Americans here. If your wife is not a citizen and you're a citizen, you're a Mexican American, she's a Mexican permanent resident, your kids are citizens, do you want to have your family ripped apart if Trump just decides that anyone who is supporting the Mexican government now is an enemy and you can be deported because the Secretary of State has decided that you have some sort of detriment to U.S. national security? Now, your wife will be ripped away from you and never see your kids ever again? Or you have to move your whole family to Mexico to remain united? You can see the creeping nature of this. It's really not that creeping, is dangerous. But the reason why, and I'll close here, Rania, and let you have the last word on this, I always go back to something that the guy in Palantir, Alex Karp, the CEO, said in the middle of the encampments here. He said, if we can't defeat these encampments, the U.S. will never be able to deploy any offensive military capability anywhere in the world ever again. And so from the elites, they recognize that the solidarity movement with Palestine and the struggle of the Palestinian people is so powerful that it could actually undermine the ability of U.S. imperialism to carry out its goals, far into the future. So they have to muzzle the movement in solidarity right at the moment where the genocide is restarting, so that nexus of the resistance and steadfastness of the Palestinian people and the on the streets, in the ballot box type of pushback happening all around the world can't come together like it did before to create a massive political crisis in many of the most powerful countries as well. So it shows the interconnected nature of the struggle worldwide, but I think it speaks to how powerful it is in terms of what they want to muzzle there.
Just the name of the Indian postdoctoral associate at Georgetown University is Badar Khan Suri, and he was arrested in Northern Virginia yesterday by ICE. And I think they're trying to send him to Texas, to a facility in Texas.
I think they've sent him to Louisiana already.
Oh, they sent him to Louisiana
I could be wrong
as well. Well, he is married to a Palestinian-American woman, and they're claiming that he represents a threat to national security because him and his wife potentially hold anti-Israel views.
Yes, and I guess her father...
They're saying
in 2006... So people have to know the history. In 2006, Hamas wins elections.
In Gaza. In Palestine.
In Palestine. Very significantly. But what's important to understand about this is Hamas decided that they wanted to open up the government. And they wanted to try to have unity and bring in different factions. They recognized a lot of people didn't necessarily, get down with Hamas. So there was a wide range of civil society that was coming in to work, in this new government. And it was sabotaged by the U.S. and by others. But what's important is the allegations are, and the only proof I've seen of this is a Hindustan Times article from 2018. So I'm not saying this is true. But even if it is true, I think it's not what they say it is. That her father at one point was a participant in this government that was, again, bringing together a pretty wide swath of people. And people who were around in 2006 will remember, Khaled Mashal was giving interviews to the Washington Post. And they were not trying to be we're just taking over and doing everything ourselves. They were trying to work with the quartet. The whole nine, the quartet had pushed for the thing. So it wasn't like some secret thing. That he was involved in that. Then subsequently, as a civil society person, that he had advise them on different times in different places about the nature of the government. So they're raising that.
Also not her, by the way, her father.
It's not her, it's her father. There's no actual connection to, any form of terrorism. At least as far as I can tell from what I'm reading, his engagement has been purely as a civil society actor with an elected government in his own country to provide various forms of advice. I mean, they don't even seem to be accusing him of himself doing anything terroristically. So there's no evidence of these people doing anything whatsoever except being related to a guy that, at one time, maybe in some way had a relationship to Hamas. So it just shows how crazy this is, but it's also revisionist history. And I think it's important to recognize it's revisionist history because that election was very important on a range of different fronts. And people have forgotten it was George W. Bush who really pushed for that election for different reasons. And then when Hamas won, they all were freaking out. And when Hamas said, let's have a unity government, that was sabotaged by, Mahmoud Abbas and various different Western actors. So it's not what it was even made out to be. And I think that this caricature of Palestinian factions by Western media makes it so hard for people to really understand what's going on. But it's scary how easy it can be twisted.
Well, I also one last thing I'll say here before we get to our next guest is I also want to note that the pushback from Democrats has been minimal to non-existent. And there's a reason that the Trump administration is going after this from the Palestine angle. I mean, one, it's to shut down the movement for liberation of Palestine. And like you mentioned, the Palantir head noting that if we don't shut down the student stuff now, we're never going to be able to do any U.S. wars later. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is the Trump administration wants to get rid of birthright citizenship. and wants to get rid of free speech. And in order to do that, you go after the most vulnerable thing. And the most vulnerable thing is Palestine, because progressives aren't going to get behind it. And I mean institutional progressives.
Sure.
I mean like the progressives, inside the Democratic Party, the various organizations that make up that sort of I guess
nexus.
Yes, nexus, network, whatever. And so it's so. I actually was thinking to myself, has AOC said anything?
About Mahmoud Khalil, she has.
She has, but it took a minute. She signed something, but where are these progressives? Because we know that James Carville said to roll over and play dead about Democrats, and Democrats kind of are rolling over and playing dead. There's been some mumblings here and there, but for the most part, this is insane. They're letting them have free reign, which shouldn't be surprising, but this goes beyond Palestine. That far beyond Palestine. Not that I'm saying you shouldn't care about that. You absolutely should. But even for those who don't, because they're a bunch of anti-Palestinian racists, or they're scared for you speak out on Palestine, you get attacked. This is the biggest attack on the First Amendment and on immigrants in this way with the law. With the kind of effects it'll have that we've seen, I think maybe in our lifetimes. This is a McCarthyist level witch hunt.